Well, for the newest arrivals, just a heads up, we are trying to record this meeting because we've had requests from folks that weren't able to make it to record it, so they could glean our collective wisdom at a later date. And I had sent out to all the folks that had responded expressing interest, a document with the respondents that I had heard from, and also Chuck Wise from Rockingham had offered up some potential discussion topics. I also wanted to sort of put up at the top of the list, one of the things we want to make sure to talk about is going forward, how often we might want to be scheduling these things. I've had some people say, oh, do it monthly. But I'm going to be trying to do this with planning commissions and also with DRBs and ZBAs. And so my bandwidth isn't likely to support wanting to do it monthly, perhaps bi-monthly or even quarterly, sort of going forward. I'll be interested in your opinions. But at any rate, we are having more folks join in. That's wonderful. Hello, Turner. Welcome.
How's it going?
And Town of Dummerston. Roger, that's not the town office. Oh, that's who town admin is. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Nice to see your smiling face. All righty. Well, it's approximately the appointed hour, so I'm here to largely take notes, I hope, or think, about discussion topics that you all are interested in, what we can do as WRC to provide information and or training or links to resources and so on and so forth. We could, so I'd be happy to hear from you all. Anyone want to start the ball rolling with things that you would find it helpful for us to work with you to address or help you address?
Okay, I'll dive in. And John, you know I'm always the first one into the pool. We are in the process of doing our planning commission to work on our town plan, so that as we get that updated, my focus in being involved with that is to be able to get our bylaws updated. And that, I think, the bylaws, ours at least, and I'm Dover, the last update was in 2013, and there is quite a lot that has changed in the usage of property, usage of houses. I mean, there's just so much that is not the same. One of the things that I really wanted to ask people about is what they're running into or how they're looking at short-term rentals and how they may or may not be considering doing anything with that and how that affects zoning in their towns. There's a couple of ideas and options, but I kind of wanted to ask around to see what our people are running into and how they're handling it.
I can speak specifically to
short-term
rentals. Yeah, I can speak to short-term rentals. We instituted in our zoning regulation of short-term rentals almost 3 years ago now, and it's been quite successful. Of course, we only have about 20 short-term rentals permitted in town at this point, so it's nothing like it is in the ski towns. But we were having the same issues. We were having parking, partying, trash, people, just afraid of strangers being in the community. And the regulations have somewhat helped to alleviate the problems and give people a path for complaining if there is issues. And it's worked out pretty well.
Roger, did you put that into the bylaw or into the town plan? Where did you create an ordinance?
We changed the bylaw. We created a new section in the bylaw to regulate it.
Cool.
We felt the town plan was broad enough in its language to allow us to do that.
Okay.
It was starting to come up with its own definitions of rental, and so we were able to tag that on as well.
Roger,
Use the state definition.
what did you use for a template for your, you know, your new codes there?
We ended from scratch.
From where?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I couldn't either.
You're breaking up, Roger.
We enacted it from scratch. We could find no template for it. So we tried to keep it simple. It's not a long section at all. I'm happy to forward it around if people would like it.
I'd like it, if you could.
Mhm.
John, would you be able to provide us a list of the emails for everybody so that I could do that?
Yep, I'll be very happy to. And my apologies, I really should have insisted that we do a round of introductions, because while I know all these smiling faces, I don't know if you all know each other. So,
That's true. That's true.
so you know me, I'm John Bennett with Wyndham Regional Commission. So next.
I'm Tabby Friedman, ZA for Dover.
I'm Turner Lewis, and I'm the chair of the zoning and planning in Halifax.
Well, down Rockingham.
Russ Hodgkins, Town of Westminster's zoning administrator and town manager.
William Moore, zoning administrator, Halifax, right under Turner.
That's true.
Roger decided some for the town.
Hi, Gig Sabore, zoning administrator and select board office administrator for Town Whitingham.
Aaron Astley, Town of Putney, Town Manager, Zoning Administrator.
Hi, I'm Bill Kearns, the town administrator and zoning administrator for the town of Grafton.
All right. So I can easily, and welcome Deb Granquist, who's joining us. While we're talking about, I'll be happy to create the list with the email addresses. I have Turner's, but I don't know what I have. I don't think I have one for William Moore. So Turner, can you send me his email so I can add it to the list?
Yep.
Or he can send it to me directly.
Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah, I can do that.
All righty. That would be very helpful. All righty. So
Roger, was it a change of
short-term
use
rentals,
for short-term rentals?
We consider them a conditional use. So everyone goes before the development review board for initial.
And what is it considered once it's approved? Is it still residential or does it change?
It's still residential.
Our DRB approved a 5-unit home being basically gutted to an Airbnb, and it was deemed a dwelling unit once the decision was made, and I wasn't sure that that was the right direction to go, but that's what our DRB decided it was.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference in our
Right.
bylaw about an owner-occupied B&B where individual bedrooms are being rented out versus a single-family dwelling that is being rented, period. So short-term, long-term, we do not currently define or regulate any of that. And we've got a problem with somebody in our town right now, a big problem, who's basically decided that it's illegal, and it isn't. A single family dwelling can be rented. End of story. Right now. So looking at a way, I'm more interested in a way of monitoring, registering, tracking those properties that are being rented out in this manner, so that should there be an issue, there's a way, as I think Roger said, to track complaints, to kind of manage or have some oversight over this. And there's software that's available to do that. There's services. There's all sorts of different ways. And it's all a question of the amount of overhead that may or may not be involved and the costs involved.
I don't know if everyone is aware that there is a bill before just considering making sure have to be.
So, Roger, you're so breaking up. I can't understand a thing you're saying.
I agree.
Can you type it in the chat box?
Sorry.
There you go.
That's okay.
Also possible that you could, not to lose your smiling face, but if you ditch your video, you might have a better connection for the audio. But thank you, Roger. Yeah, I'd heard that. I haven't seen any particulars. That's something that may show up on the, for example, on the VPA listserv, if they're tracking it.
Was a VLCT legislative update last week. You can look back for that.
Ah, okay. Maybe that's where I saw it, yeah.
I know that it's on the legislature's agenda, but still not sure where they've gotten with that.
Or how far they will get.
Exactly.
So, well, that's, so, all right. So short-term rental, clearly a topic of interest, and we may be able to try to track information and share that anyway. Any other topics of particular interest to those? And special thanks to Chuck for the list of possible discussion topics.
Excuse me for the stream of consciousness, but I blasted John with all my ideas. Some of them are pretty prosaic, others are more, of interest, but even, like the small things of how to name zoning permits, I'm interested in. But I guess broadly, the biggest interest I have right now is how people are adapting to the pandemic. We had a lot of positive feedback for allowing businesses to migrate onto sidewalks last year. We've learned a few things from that in terms of cleaning up after the operations are over. But generally speaking, it was one of those things that you're like, huh, why did we wait for a pandemic to start doing this? This actually works out quite well.
Yep, and that was something that you guys enacted as an interim bylaw, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I wouldn't have figured that out unless you guys sent the directions and you updated us that this was a possibility. And we hopped right on it, and it worked out pretty well. I don't know if there's other ideas that people employed during the pandemic that, you know, made sense to them, or even mistakes made. I don't know.
Well, Mike, didn't you guys try to grapple with that also in Wilmington? Allowing outdoor gathering or dining?
It was allowed as a temporary bylaw through the zoning administrator.
What'd you think, Mike?
Honestly, I haven't gotten any interest yet. I mean, I think people did this without going through my office, a couple of them, but the majority, you know, it hasn't been an issue thus far. We also looked at maybe allowing the ZA to make decisions that would normally go to the DRB, and that got no traction. I tried, and I'll continue.
Well, we did a staff approach, but in order to allay people's concerns, we created a team of us so that the police chief, fire chief, zoning administrator, highway superintendent, and development director would all have to coordinate and make the decision, a unanimous decision on to issue the permit. So it was still staff-led, but it wasn't an effort to put any authority into any one person.
That might get more traction in Wilmington.
We've had some restaurants go to some outdoor seating and dining. In general, they haven't necessarily come over for re-permitting on that, because since their permitted numbers for indoors went to 0 and their outdoor space, so long as they weren't on the sidewalk or somewhere where they shouldn't be, and they kept their numbers balanced with what their parking allowance is, we haven't really had an issue with that, with one exception. And that exception is a challenging one, because there's a difference between what they were permitted by the DRB for allowable space according to their parking, and what the fire marshal has as a physical building permit, which is not the same number as what their operating permit is. So there's a conflict of numbers there, and that's going to be challenging to try to sort out. But other than that, we have not had very many issues with the outdoor space usage. Just the one.
All the wide open spaces. All right. Any other topics on the top of people's agenda wanting to discuss right now, or to talk about putting on a list for addressing a future gathering?
Septic tanks for the future, because I'm dealing a lot with that, with trying to redevelop and whether they can use existing tanks. You've got houses that are 50 years old, and they're trying to make additions to it with a tank that's been in the ground forever. And what would be allowed and what needs state permitting.
Septic permitting?
And wells.
Because you you were a little faint at the beginning of that, so I'm not sure I caught it.
Yes, septic permitting and particularly existing tanks that are in the ground.
Okay. I mean, at some point, for example, to try and address that topic in the future, we might invite someone from A&R wastewater permitting to participate in a meeting. And then you could fire at that person at will, and you'd be getting a far more direct response than I would be able to provide for sure. Anyway.
Because there's definitely a gap. I have old permits before everything went to the state that gives some information. And then there was the gap between when the town ceased permitting and the state picked it up, but not everything has been updated to the state database. So there's some stuff, unless I maybe have something in a file, I don't have anything. What I tend to recommend, if someone is going to be doing any major renovation, I strongly suggest that they get their septic system inspected, just as a matter of course. And then if they can, give me a copy of that report that I can add to the file so that there's something there. If they're changing the number of bedrooms, then I require them to refile a septic permit with the state if they're changing the number of spaces that is over and above what they were originally permitted. But I still don't have any weight to that because it's a state issue, not a town issue. But I just kind of say, you might want to get that looked at. I liked Chuck's note, and something I wanted to talk about is who is doing fully electronic permitting and filing or not, and how you're going about that, as well as if you are allowing or if you have fully electronic file review.
I can speak on my end. Because of the pandemic and shutting down town hall, I created those fillable forms through Adobe PDF.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
that's
people
all my
just type
forms
in
are
things.
fillable.
Yeah, and so they could just type in everything. They don't need to give me a signature. We can take their credit card information over the phone. So, and they can accept the permit by email. So in many cases, we're not having any in-person transactions at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I built all of our forms to be fillable, but we do not do credit card transactions. So that's something that, you know, I'll have them mail me a check or whatever, but there are some people who are still not able to deal with or work with electronic in any form. Now, our town offices are open by appointment. I'm here. So if somebody needs to bang on the back door and hand me a set of plans or have a discussion about things, I'm available to that. We were not 100% closed at any time. I was here the whole time, actually. But there's a couple of different ways that I'm looking to start digitizing everything. And I was wondering if anybody's gone that route yet.
We've gotten back to 1986 digitized.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a slog.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point, I think with 1986, we're just saying, look, that's far enough. If you have a pining interest for something in 1985 and back, then you can just go into the vault.
Mm.
In Dummerston, we have scanned and have electronic files going back to about 1970. And we do keep paper copies of everything as well. It's double the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be interested, well, not so much me, but my town clerk who loves to have space in her vault. If you do have the PDF, we have the PDF on our network, we have a backup on the cloud, and we keep a solid state drive of all the scans in the vault. But we still are somewhat timid, and we've kept the paper. But the permits occupy 2 shelves, it's probably 20, about 2 dozen feet of documents over the years collected.
Yeah, I've got an entire room full of I've got about 9 file cabinets full. And I'm planning on digitizing everything, but there's no real way to go through, let's say, a file for a property and then say, oh, I'm not going to, let's say there's 3 pages that are 1993 and some from the 70s. I'm going to try to do it just property by property, the entire folder. And then everything that I'm doing now gets scanned and backed up. But I'm looking to basically have a big project of scanning my entire file cabinet. And that's just zoning. And zoning and some of the old septic. I still have piles and piles of blueprints. I do have a wide format scanner, so I can scan those. Never mind the Act 250 stuff, and never mind things that my town clerk has that are in the big vault. So that's all the deeds, all of that. That's a whole different animal. And of course, I want to tie it into our tax map software and possibly into ProVal. So if you're in there and you click on a property, you can pull up the folder with all the information. That's my end goal. But I can dream.
So for those towns that are doing the electronic, do you do site visits also? And if you are doing site visits to verify setbacks, etc., how do you have an application in your hand? You have to print them out and you're carrying them anyway?
I use an iPad if we're going to fill it out together. Getting used to that, but I don't think that that's actually something I would recommend. In that case, yeah, I mean, just print copies works. My end goal has always been to make these things searchable. So as much as I can to keep it digital, so that we start, we can do search, these, if it's electronic, then you can, pick up all sorts of keywords. So in some cases, it means collecting stuff using the clipboard traditionally, and then just typing it in as soon as we get back in the office. I don't have a system that I'm trying to move in that direction, but it's not something I feel comfortable recommending to others right now.
So how do you check for previous violations, meaning additions to the property once you land there? How do you verify that everything's accounted for?
That's the one success story, because it's all on my laptop. Because sometimes you swing by a property you didn't expect to. I can just do a quick search in that folder to see what do I have for that, property, and catch up. So I don't have to pre-plan. That's been kind of nice.
Because the big thing in Westminster is we had, in the last 10 years, studios that are now apartments. And you get to the site and the septic system is already being compromised by two facilities, not just the one house that was registered for a 3-bedroom. Now you've got a 4th or maybe even a 5th bedroom, quote unquote, going into the same system. And that's what I'm catching when I land on a site. I have folders, both the listers folder and my own, and that way I can compare what are we taxing for and what are we actually permitting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I found it very helpful to have the ability to print a report that shows all the permits that were ever issued on a certain parcel. And this I can take with me when I go. And if something isn't there, then I know something was done without a permit.
We've been inundated in the last 2 to 3 years with compliance letters from researchers. They want to know that the property is clear, free and clear, and that's a flip of a coin. Until you actually go to the site, what the past owner did or the previous owner from that, even 2 owners ago, without seeing it, boots on the ground, you don't have no idea.
Yeah.
We do not provide compliance letters. Our attorney was very firm about that. We do not provide it. We will provide the zoning folder. I will help them review it and understand what's in there, but we will not provide a compliance letter that guarantees that everything is on the up and up.
I don't guarantee anything. It's to the best of my
Exactly.
ability at the point of looking at the files.
Yeah, we just don't. But I'm not going out to a site necessarily to do any of that. I'm reviewing what's in the file, what's available, and as they are doing their title search or whatever it is they're doing, whatever records we have, that's what we go by. I'll go out and check a site if there's something that's been brought to my attention or a big question, but usually my on-site inspections are to verify that what they are, an addition or whatever they're about to do is marked and staked to what they say they are going to do. And they're not building a living room on somebody else's property. Which has happened.
Yeah, I found with compliance letters, I do send them out. I include a report of all the permits that were issued on the parcel. And then I put a big disclaimer saying I have not visited the site, and if anything is not to, the current report, then it is on the property owners to rectify it.
I definitely do that exact same thing. Huge disclaimer at the bottom that this to the best of our ability. I'm interested in a comment that was given to us on this paper, John, and I don't know who created it. Administrative versus DRB permitting.
I can speak to that, Russ. Just understanding sort of, I think the DRB is best able to handle the more amorphous or the conditional use review kind of things when it's a sort of a checkbox enterprise and that language has been clearly detailed in the bylaws, then it can be done administratively. But I'm very interested to see how other towns do it, because where you set that line, because I have DRB members complain that this is sort of a paint by numbers, permitting process, and they didn't necessarily need to meet for this. Conversely, we want to respect the public's concern that not too much power be vested in the administrator. So having sort of a broad discussion on that topic would be of interest to me.
Well, we, as you just said, the DRB doesn't meet unless it's substantial subdivisions and anything commercial. But for the daily additions, new homes, we have it strictly in our bylaws that the zoning administrator will do that.
Yeah.
They always have the ability to appeal my decision and go to the DRB. So, when it's a gray area, I call the chair of the Development Review Board and ask him what his thoughts are. And we typically go to the point that the ZA will take care of it until such time as somebody has a problem, and then it will be appealed to the DRB.
Is that codified in the bylaws, or is that just sort of accepted practice in Westminster?
No, it is in our bylaws very clearly
cool.
that the zoning administrator will do the mundane, like you said, check the box type of permits.
No, I mean the consultation.
The consultation with the chair?
Yes.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not. That's practice that we've done since I've been there.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Our bylaw basically has me doing all the administrative, and then we have a grid with what is conditional, what is permitted, etc. Anything that's conditional is automatically a DRB meeting. And then I will check with our chair if there's anything that's a little hinky that may or may not cross that line. And we have, of course, the appeals process.
Yeah, we work the same way.
So John, a curiosity would be is, when you look at the region, where's the needle? Who's the most conservative in terms of tossing most of the work to the DRB versus the other side of it, which is, putting more responsibility on the administrator? That would be of interest. John, did we lose you?
He's muted.
You're muted, John.
Muted, sorry, muted.
There you go.
That's a very interesting question. And I don't have a quick answer off the top of my head. And it sounds like actually a fairly significant amount of work to compare all the zoning bylaws in the region to see where that ends up lying. But it's probably something that might be valuable to do. So I'm not going to commit to having an answer in a week or anything like that. I would say that, as is true of almost everything, all Vermont towns try to do things their own way, and almost no one does everything in any consistent or same way. By and large, everyone tries to adhere to statute, which says that, and I'm not going to go all lawyery here, but basically the statute says that you may delegate administrative approval, but you have to do so with written standards, which I think most everyone's pretty good about. But the written standards don't, for example, usually involve that consultation that Russ was talking about, and I think that Tabby was talking about, but which is really a good idea. So I need to take a second and try to write a note now about this homework that Chuck is trying to give me. Where do zoning bylaws stand on delegating administrative approval?
So Chuck, realistically, you put out 50 permits. What's the percentage of yours to DRB?
40 admin, 10 DRB. And that's a very good question, Russ.
Tabby?
Mine would be fewer. I try to, we don't get that many that would come up before the DRB, depending. So I'd call it maybe 45 and 5 out of a 50. I spent a lot of time working with the people to make sure that it doesn't run afoul of our grid to then force it up to a DRB.
45 U and 5 DRB?
I'd say, yeah.
We're 40-10.
B stuff is
easily
for specialty, weird subdivisions, a change of use. And change of use really is where lately most of my DRB stuff has been in, or specialty use. I don't know if everybody has a grid, such as what we have in our bylaw that's for each zone. If something is a permitted use, a conditional use, or not allowed whatsoever. And that's really my key towards whether, if it's a conditional, it's automatic DRB. And so that really sort of gives me a jump in.
Good. Mike?
We've made efforts to kind of amend things, but right now our DRB hears about 10 cases a year out of about 70 permits that I've been issuing. But a lot of them are pretty small. It's, you know, it's changing out windows. Our historic district is so restrictive. Simple changing things to meet building code requires them to go to the DRB now, and it's viewed by many as onerous, where I would like to, other than a board for board change, I can't allow them a permit unless they go through the DRB. So it's deterred development, and that's been the problem, that the people are afraid of our DRB because they have a pattern of inconsistency. They've had 2 variance cases in November. One was approved and the other was denied, and I didn't see much of a difference between the 2. And I think that's one of the challenges. And we've got DRB members that don't want to be trained either. And that's the other part of the concern, when the stuff ultimately could go to court. And if they don't have that consistency, that's my concern.
Now that you brought up the H word, historic villages are absolutely a nightmare. You'll, just like you said, it goes to the DRB, and we have houses that are side by side in the historic village. One is historic, one is not. And so what rules do you apply to one house versus the other just because of the age of the building? We're awful at it. We've lost a lot of historic integrity because of it, trying to be fair to all. It's not fun.
I think our design review has done more to de-incentivize investment, because people take one look at a 3-month process and said, you know what, I'm just going to let it ride. And if we had, you know, somewhat standards that could be done more quickly and allows, or they've been trapped where the standard that the DRB wants does not conform with the fire code standard. So it leaves the individual in between those 2 worlds, trying to reconcile things.
And it's cost. It's to do it historically, it's going to cost you $30,000. To do it economically and with all the energy standards, it's going to cost you $10,000. Which one are you going to do? Which one are you going to force them to do? That's where we struggle.
So it's, you know, you want these performance standards or some aspirational standards, but you don't want to be so prescriptive that I've been in meetings that you're talking about a style window, shutters without shutters, and an hour goes by and you're like, oh no, this is not, where's the compelling governmental interest to talk about shutters?
Yeah. We're losing a lot of slate roofs.
Yeah.
To metal roofs. And, you know, the energy background tells you that slate is horrible, and that the insulation value and the longevity of a metal roof is it, but it's not historic. And again, another one, side by side, this guy puts in a standing seam roof and this guy doesn't, and you know, he just spent 30 grand more than the other one because we made him, because his house is older. So it's not a good feeling to pick and choose.
Wow. Yike. So.
In these historic houses where they're changing the interiors because they want to avoid the DRB, they're putting in more dwelling units. that were maybe more commercial spaces going into residential now, but we don't have those records in our files. And then you're seeing something in a real estate ad where they're saying there's 7 apartments when we've only permitted 3. And it's a historic dwelling, and then it becomes a big kind of mess between lawyers and real estate agents in the town.
Dead giveaway is the 12 cars in the yard.
Oh, man. Yike.
I've had to deal with that with a couple of buildings in Dummerston, and really what I ended up hinging it on was the septic permit. That they can't just increase the amount of apartments or bedrooms in a building without going before the state to update their septic permit.
I ask you guys a general question. I hate to call them refugees because they show up in really expensive SUVs and they have accents, urban accents, but I'm getting kind of hit up by a lot of people moving to town from New York, Boston, Jersey. Is that happening to everybody else too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Big time.
Yeah, and some of the conversations are really surreal. Like, you don't need a permit to renovate your living room. I guess that's a requirement somewhere else in the world. People didn't realize they heated with oil. They prefer electricity. And I was like, well, each his own.
They're buying properties sight unseen too.
Yeah, and they have to close yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's affecting everybody because it definitely is affecting us. It's not hitting Bellows Falls proper, but boy, townwide, it's on.
Yeah. We've had more property flip in any number of ways. One thing that has been helpful is people who own property and were seasonal or weekenders who've now changed their weekend house to their full-time house or whatever. They've been here, they're property owners, they're taxpayers. They kind of have an idea, so we can sort of work with them. Usually what comes around is, well, what had enough space for a comfortable weekend house now does not have enough space when 3 kids are remote schooling and 2 professionals are both trying to conduct their work remotely in a small house where you can hear everything. So this is where some of the additions, or they want to build a garage with a playroom above it to, put the kids upstairs and things like that. So we've seen a lot of that. The challenge is people who are buying sight unseen. Again, oh, I'm closing in 3 hours and I need you to evaluate this property. I'm like, sorry, I'm not in the office right now. Too bad. And people who have never been to Vermont who are suddenly moving up here and have no clue. That's really where some of the challenge is. Some of the permanent weekenders are a little bit easier to work with. They're just getting them into the flow of town and getting them used to what happens and what doesn't happen. That's a little easier.
Camps to full-time residents. They're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Does anybody else? Go ahead, Roger.
I can't believe the number of requests I get for the building codes here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Wearing 2 hats, I have had I want to say this politically correct. I have noticed that 184 full-time residents have filed their income tax as non-homestead out of 1,700. We had 184. And these are longtime residents. We've tracked some of them to H&R Block filing incorrectly for them. And so they were able to do this. And others are doing it on purpose because our tax rate for homestead is much more than it would be for a non-homestead. Is anybody else finding that or in that realm? Not so
My
much.
treasurer would have to answer that one.
Okay, so you guys don't run into that. It's the
I'm
other
sure
hat.
we do. I mean, I am a recent full-time resident. I've been up here, you know, my family's been coming up here since 54. We built our house in 72. I now own the house, and I can personally say I don't think I'm filing homestead. I've been up here full-time now for 2 years, and I think I'm still non-homestead. I just haven't done it right. But I can guarantee I'm not alone.
Well,
Russ, in
Nope.
Grafton, we have a lot like that, but it's mainly the complication. Most people don't know, even the old timers who have done it every year, but they're kind of losing it. They just forget and they just don't file it. And sometimes it's really bad. The consequences are really bad, especially if they're old timers and they are getting credit for a low income and stuff like that. They don't get it, and that causes a real problem. But it's mainly they either just forget or they go to a new tax preparer who isn't used to Vermont or whatever it is. They just don't file it. And it's not good.
We have quite a few platted subdivisions with no infrastructure in them. And we've actually seen, I've got a couple calls from folks that have bought lots that you can't access them. I saw it a lot down south, but I didn't think it was happening up here as well. But some of the old haystack developments, they built, you know, platted out 100 units, and there's no roads, there's no buildings there, but they've been flipping the parcels because people have them on their tax bills. And then I get calls from people wanting to know what they can do with that property, and I'm not giving them much of a guidance other than, you know, putting a tent there.
wow.
Mike, are some of those lots, is there any right of way going in there, or?
There is, but there's no road actually going physically in that alignment. It's just woods. You know, that
So
was
is
the
it-
problem. They platted so much in the 70s
Oh,
that really
sure.
was not developable.
Mhm. So it's sort of the dotted line for access. If somebody actually cleared that and put that road in, would that property be developable, or is it something that's in the wildlife wetland flood zone?
It would be developable, but you know, we talked about, you know, if there's no water, you're putting in wells and septic on quarter-acre lots. So they either have to combine the lots and try to figure out. That's the other part of it. These are tiny lots that were
I think I know
developed
where you're talking
with
about.
no infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get an earful when they buy this property for a, you know, a deal, and then they find out. Similarly, they got other subdivisions where there's no sewer line to connect up, or it's across the road, and they don't have the ability to connect up to it, and they don't have enough room for a septic tank.
Yeah. And then people come and say, well, how come you didn't tell me it wasn't developable? And I'm like, A, not my job. B, I'm not a land engineer. And C, not my job.
But get in there.
I can look to see if it's in a wildlife, you know, go to the A&R maps or look at our flood zone and say, you know, or I know this property because I've walked through it and it's never going to perk. Go ahead and hire somebody to find that out, but I can tell you it's a swamp. You know?
All righty. Well, thank you all. I'm not trying to bring anything to a too early close, but I wanted to be mindful of the time. And I know some folks have to get off because they have to prepare for other meetings or go into other meetings. Very interesting discussion. I suspect that there might be interest in doing this again in the not too distant future. So what do folks think? Every other month, maybe WRC tries to host one of these things? Does that work?
How about
Would that
quarterly?
be good?
How about quarterly?
Quarterly? All righty. I mean, quarterly's fine by me.
I'd prefer every other month, but I'll go with what the group wants. But certainly,
All right, I'm gonna-
email and stuff, some of us can talk amongst ourselves and bounce a few ideas off too, and we may be
Yep.
able to come up with,
Yep.
you know, Chuck's
No, I think,
were pretty excellent. And so, you know, if we're talking amongst ourselves, we may be able to come up with a couple of more interesting things.
yep. All righty,
Yeah,
so
this-
let me do a scientific poll here. Quarterly or every other month? So for quarterly, put your hand up.
Yeah. My hand's up, William Moore.
Okay, okay. Quarterly it is. Future meetings, quarterly. Wonderful. And I want to also ask, is this time of day, this day of the week, is there a better time or day? I know that at least one of you has lots of work to do to prepare for a meeting this evening. And so I want to try to avoid those kind of conflicts if I can.
We talking about Russ here? Too many hats, Russ. Too many
Yeah,
hats.
there you go.
There you go. So I think
Somewhere in the
for Russ's sake,
lunchtime,
Thursdays,
somewhere in the lunchtime
Thursdays
neighborhood overall is
would be
good.
better.
Doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't
All
matter to
right.
me either.
I may just send out an email to you folks and say, pick a date.
Yeah.
Pick a day of the week and we'll go with that. One other thing I wanted to sort of raise is that we've been talking about doing this sort of a conversation with floodplain administrators. Some of you may, in fact, be that also. And I just wasn't sure, we weren't sure whether floodplain administration was enough of its own topic to have a separate gathering of floodplain administrators.
I think
So,
in my town,
what is-
yes.
so I'm seeing a couple of nodding heads. So I'm probably going to work with Alyssa from our office to see whether she wants to set up a similar thing with floodplain administrators. And I may or may not be part of it, but we would be very happy to do that. So floodplain separate. Okay, wonderful. And I will create or add to the document that I sent out, the email addresses, so that I can just get it out to all of you. And Halifax will provide me William Moore's email.
I sent it while we were doing this. Do you know if
Oh,
it came
good.
through?
I will take a quick look. And it did not come to my email address. You have mine, John Ben at wyndhamregional.org.
What's your email address?
JOHNBENN
ALHN
B JOHN John
JLHN
JO.
JOHN John.
Yep. BENN. It's an ancient one from back in the day when there were 3 email accounts in the Wyndham region. And it's at wyndhamregional.org.
wyndhamregional.org. Okay, I'll try again. I put it at, what I did is I replied to the notice I got about this conference. I just replied to that and send it that way. Okay, John Bennett, Wyndham Regional.org. Okay, I see it now.
All righty. Thank you, thank you. I will let you all go. You're certainly welcome to stay on longer if you'd like, but
Well, I just want to,
otherwise,
I just want to express my thoughts and say that we really appreciate you coming forward with this. It's a very, very useful thing to have. especially
Absolutely.
for-
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you
all
very much.
right, wonderful.
Yes,
We're very
can't
happy
agree
doing
more.
it.
Thank you.
It seemed to me that it seemed to be quite productive, so we're very happy to facilitate more. Woo-hoo! All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
All right, my pleasure. Bye now.
I tried it again, John. Hopefully it'll show
All
up. this
righty,
time.
I'll take a quick peek. Not here yet, but we'll succeed.
Okay,
Thank you, Bill, for joining in.
sure. Well, we'll hope to see you again soon.
All righty. Yes, indeed. Thank
Okay.
you, Bill Kearns, for joining
Thank
in.
you. Thanks, John. Very nice.
All righty. Have a good
Take
one.
care. You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.